Hello everyone, Simon Jacobson here. Pleasure to be with you. I hope you're having a good day, good weekend. We will be speaking about something that affects us all. Following mainstream media versus thinking for yourself. The truth is, it's not about mainstream media alone. It's in general in life. Do we really know how to think for ourselves? Are we independent thinkers? Because let's put it perfectly blunt. By the time you even realize that you're thinking about ideas, you're most likely somewhat of a teenager or maybe an adult, and you've been taught what you should be thinking, whether it's starting from parents and parental attitudes, or school, education, or friends, or media, whatever form of media. This is true throughout history. Even before we've had social media and technology, we've always had all types of forces and voices influencing us, for good and for bad. So by the time you're able to even ask the question, can I think for myself? There's so many ideas that have been streamed into your being, you can't even distinguish. What would you think for yourself and how much is it a reflection of what others people told you to think? I'm not suggesting now maliciousness and brainwashing in a deliberate fashion. But even if it's not deliberate, we are impressionable minds, we're impressionable children, and not only our ideas, but even the way we think, our methodologies, are so much influenced by the people around us, especially the adults. Now, if it's adults who are very careful and really, in a very precise way, helped us learn not just what to think, but how to think, which of course is a very rare instance, that's one thing. But that's not usually the case. Now, when you're dealing with dysfunctional parents and dysfunctional education, then clearly a lot of our ideas may be just total distortions. We may have all types of prejudices and biases and subjective ideas that have nothing to do with reality, or at least somewhat distorted reality. But even if it wasn't dysfunctional and if it wasn't deliberate, the fact of the matter is that we do not grow up in a neutral tabula rasa where we just have a clean slate, and by the time you're an adult, you just say, okay, let me just begin thinking for myself. I'm sure most of you have thought about this in many ways, and I don't know if we've done anything about it. We'd like to feel we're open-minded people. We'd like to feel we're objective. We'd like to feel that we are broad in the sense we can hear all types of opinions and we have no preconceived notions. But is that indeed the case? Let's be honest, is that indeed the case? It's a very good question, right? And I would say it's not so black and white and not so simple, because there's so much going on in our lives that it's very hard to determine who are you versus what you have heard. I speak for myself right now. I grew up in a relatively, I would say, healthy home. Relatively, I say simply because there's no such thing as perfect. We all have our parents, we all have our issues. And I grew up in a religious environment, an Orthodox Hasidic religious home, which has strong positions about things, certain absolute morality, guidelines that come from the Bible and from the Talmud and from Jewish teachings, standards, what's considered right, what's considered wrong. It's not moral relativism, strong opinions. In my particular case, happened to be that my father, especially my father, but my parents in general, very open-minded individuals, strong in their beliefs, but were not insecure. My father was a journalist. I say was because he's now in heaven, wherever he may be. And he was a journalist and is a very open-minded, very secure person who never silenced me or anybody. People are entitled to their opinions. Ideas flew, we could be skeptical. It was a certain type of comfort, which really, for myself personally, worked very well, because I wouldn't have responded in a good way to dogmatic and didactic type of preaching. And I know from my own friends and classmates, not everyone experienced that, so I don't take it for granted. I didn't think about it when I was a kid. Who thinks about these things? But as I became an adult, this had a strong bearing. But can I say that it was a clean slate, as if like, okay, I'm starting from scratch, I'm going to travel and expose myself and absorb and listen to every particular school of thought, from east to west, Eastern thought, Western thought. So how I see it, and I speak now for myself because I think it's vital to be transparent and not just speak about it in theoretical terms. In my particular situation, I was a voracious reader, and I read books, I read ideas, many ideas that went counter to what I grew up with. As a matter of fact, it would be considered sacrilegious even to open those type of books, because they skeptical, atheistic, cynical. Not only that, but I read many such books, and different schools of thought, different religions, non-religions, and it was fascinating to me. So that gave me exposure, but I was still impacted from my youngest age with certain things that just became part of my second nature. You know, like in the morning you say a certain prayer, what you eat, all the regulations that the religious upbringing includes. Now, because I consider myself somewhat open-minded, I was able to challenge or ask myself about all these different things that I grew up with, but it still was not completely neutral. I do have a soft spot, so to speak, and more than a soft spot. Many things may be completely ingrained in me from that early childhood, and I will never deny that. But is there anyone on earth that is not affected that way? When I speak to people who say to me, okay, you grew up in a religious background, so you're no longer objective. And I said, whatever background you grew up with, if you grew up in a home of communist, socialist thinkers, or atheists, you're also influenced from the youngest of age. So we all come with baggage, good baggage or bad baggage. And I think it's vital to acknowledge that. To say there's a human being on earth that's just a purely objective computer, completely untouched, unaffected by childhood, is absolutely incorrect. There's no such person. It's impossible. Because even if you grew up in a home with no parents, God forbid, that also influenced you. If you grew up in the street, that influences you. And those impressionable years only happen once when you're a child. It's not like once you've ingrained, once you've absorbed, once you've assimilated certain things, certain attitudes, they're very hard to change. Didn't say they're impossible to change. So I think the first thing is important to acknowledge our subjectivity. That's a given. The question is, where do you go from there? Can you then, acknowledging and knowing there may be certain biases, and they're not always bad biases. They're beautiful things. They're things you learn, good habits, good attitudes, refined behavior. In other words, you're not just growing up in the wild. These things are also ingrained in you. They also make you're not totally objective, but they happen to be, we can all agree that they are positive influences that have shaped us. So then we ask the question, are we thinking for ourselves, or does the media determine it? It's connected, of course, to the broader question of, in general, are we thinking for ourselves? And to be very honest, many of us, I wouldn't say lazy is the right word, but it's part of it, do stick to our box. And we conform to what we are accustomed to, what we're comfortable with, the comfort zone. So now when you look at the media, which is streaming all the time, inundating us, literally overloading our circuits, it's not a surprise that if a person who has been impressionable and remains that way and has never challenged themselves, their own subjective viewpoints, even from, as I said, home and school and other influences, then of course now the media is sending messages. So here, that's the latest influence. And we see how it reacts. Last time you watched a piece of news and it infuriated you one way or the other, that immediately means that you're being influenced. Because whatever is being told to you is either making you angry or making you happy. Now, I'm not suggesting it's malicious, but who knows? What are they saying to you? Who decided that piece of information is objective truth? We know today that there's a lot of political polarization. I remember in the Trump years, and it's still, many people still living in the shadow of Trump, watching CNN and Fox side by side. Two narratives as of two different universes. And I said to myself, so who's right here? Am I going to go verify every statement they make? Let's even argue that they both are stating facts, but selected facts. This one decides to focus on the bad news. This one decides to focus on the good news. And the same thing in any given area. So we always believe the media, the free press. That was what Thomas Jefferson said, that if I had to choose between freedom of speech and freedom of free press or free speech, I would choose free press, because without free press, we don't have free speech. which means free expression, because the press is essentially the watchdogs. They're helping us make sure. But is that really the case? And again, I'm not taking any sides. If Facebook decides to ban Trump, okay, is that coming from political reasons? Would they also ban someone that political persuasions are similar to them and their influences? So is that considered objective? And I'm not questioning their decision. They have a right. They own their company. They can do whatever they like unless it's illegal. And the same thing in general. I mean, those that decide what to ban, people ban something, they'll say because that person is inciting violence. But that can be accusation, can go across both sides of the aisle. So in other words, who then is the referee? Who's determining? So I can't speak for others that we're not in control of. What I could say is to you and to myself, you are in control of what goes in and out of your system. There's an interesting statement that says that we have 7 gatekeepers in our lives. There are 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 nostrils, and a mouth. Everything going into your life goes into one of those gates. And you control what will go in, what will go out. So what you choose, what media to watch, what media not to watch, how much it's going to affect you. I would say that it'd be very healthy for all of us, no matter where you come from, is to try to not allow other voices to influence you. Try that for a while. Now, for some of us, it's very difficult because that's where we get our opinions from. Look, let's be honest. People's opinions are often just they're parroting that which they heard. Now, why do they trust that source? Whatever reason. Everyone has their reasons. Did we do a thorough research of determining which is a source I can rely on, which one not? So we use our judgment calls, and some of us, we're all intelligent people, and some of us do come, and we finally do come to some things you can rely on. I mean, even look at COVID. Who can you trust regarding the whole medical institutions? They seemingly were all lost in the beginning, and even today, nobody really knows completely. They're attempting, and we are trusting to some extent taking a vaccine and other guidelines, and then you start seeing the political bickering. And of course, I'm not even getting into conspiracy theories, which, that alone is another, some people are influenced by that. But can you really come to total clarity? Now, if you lived in a little town where you're no streaming, no media, no social media, no nothing, whatever you learn is you see with your own eyes. You see there's water in a fountain, you drink the water. You go buy some bread, you know the people around you, you learn whom you can trust. It's a very simple life, but we don't live in a world like that, at least not most of us. So we are constantly being basically marketed to. People are marketing to us. Some things are good, some things are not, but how do you determine? You do a Google search, so most people say a Google search will give you objective results. I think in most cases that may be the case. You get different opinions and so on. But a lot of times you see opinions and then you realize, 1 second, this has become a fact. So I'm not here to bash all these information sources we rely on. I'm here to really try to reclaim ourselves, reclaim your soul. For me personally, it comes down to this. I try to focus on what are my priorities in my life, whether it's family, personal, whether it's work-related, whether it's social related, whether it's entertainment related, and I try to do the best to filter that which comes into my being. And I don't come to any conclusions just because someone said so. Now, if I need to, let's say I need to find a medical opinion, so we get one medical opinion, you get another one, and hopefully a very different one, and you go to a third party, 3 separate, and you go 2 out of 3. If something really rubs you wrong, it's not resonating, challenge it. That's generally the approach. Now, I know it sounds so simple, but frankly, it needs work. You need to take control of your life. You need to own your life. So if you want to think for yourself, I'm not suggesting you can suddenly drop everything and every source of information and start becoming an independent thinker. At the end of the day, we rely on books, we rely on media, we rely on different sources for information. But you're totally in control of looking at all types of information. I make it a habit that whenever any idea comes my way, I think of an idea work-related. I always stretch it and say, what happens if I did the exact opposite? And sometimes I'll go to someone who I know will always be a contrarian and will challenge everything that I'm saying. Not because I'm just looking to have fun, or play mind games, or play a chess game, because it's important for intellectual honesty and objectivity is to hear the exact opposite argument. I remember we have office meetings. Sometimes I'll bring up an idea, and I think it's a good idea. And then I'll say, 1 second, let's discuss this. Maybe we should do the exact opposite of this, or not do it. And I remember some people in my staff saying, you just suggested the idea. Why are you now knocking it? Because that's how good minds think. You want to stretch it in every direction and then come back and say, you know what? I asked all the right questions. I challenged it in every possible way. And now I see a crystallized picture. Sometimes it may be the initial idea as we had it. Sometimes variations. Think of a scientific experiment. You come to a certain result. But you don't know for sure that that's a final result. You know why? Maybe that result happened because of the limited conditions. A certain temperature. So you have to test it in a very hot temperature and test it in a very cold temperature and in a different environment with different circumstances. Once you've tested it in so many different ways, you can come away saying, this is close to something that's working. This is what's called true research. Now, of course, people forge and fake, and that creates problems. But if you're an honest person with yourself, this is how you should look at things. And this I include even issues of God and religion and faith. Some of you may know me. Faith is a powerful resource. It's not the absence of reason. It's the step beyond reason. But you need reason as well. Because reason helps keep you honest. Because it could be just blind faith. You heard it from someone that you trusted. And who knows? Maybe it was just something you were convinced of. We have to be able to challenge ourselves. This doesn't mean the truths may not be, the truth may be true. But you have to challenge yourself, why are you embracing this truth? Perhaps you have some bias, some prejudice. And that's fine, as long as you acknowledge it. That's called full disclosure. That's called transparency. So we live in a world today where I hear statistics that by the time we're age 20 years old, the average Western man or woman at age 20 has seen or heard 1 million advertisements. I heard this a number of years ago. I was at part of a conference in Lima, Peru, on happiness. And one of the participants shared this statistic. I think it's a much more today, especially with the social media and with technology. But let's say 1 million. That's a lot of information. And trust me, no way that you can get all those million products or services that were offered to you. So it can create a lot of anxiety as well. You feel you're missing something. You're feeling deprived. But besides that, how much of that information affects our thinking? And how much of the subliminal psychological manipulation that's going on in advertising and marketing? The colors, the scents. You go to a supermarket where they place things. There's all kinds of stuff in order to get people's attention. Because the bandwidth is narrow, and there's so much that's offering, and everyone's vying that desperate, extremely valuable space in your mind to get that attention, and that you should remain, want to retain you and convert you. All these words, retention, conversion, etc. So we're not in a neutral world. We're under assault. And I'm not suggesting that in a negative way. An assault means we're not just neutral. Everyone wants something of us. Every email you open up, every text you open up, there's something that's wanted. So it's critical that you become a gatekeeper of your 7 gates. Today more than ever. Because when we lived in that pure environment where there was no media and there was no technology, yes, you still had influences, but they were limited and minimal, and you could be much easier to control what's going in and out. But today, information, the flow of information, anything at any time, at any place, literally immediately on your smartphone, it's a new world, my friends. And as such, we're dealing with a whole different new set of challenges. Let us become a gatekeeper, become deliberate. Yes, deliberate. Think about what's entering in your eye, what you're looking at, and what you're hearing, and what you're smelling, and what you're tasting. Because these 5 senses are the only gates that connect us to the world around us. If you shut your eyes, close your ears, your taste, touch, and smell, shut it all down, what are you left with? Yourself. Without the stimulation of the interaction between you and others. Because you don't need eyes to see yourself. You don't need ears to hear yourself. You don't need a nose to smell yourself. You don't need a mouth to taste yourself. So what is it? It's an interaction with those around us, which is vital in life. We are social creatures. We need community. We need love. We need relationships. We need intimacy. We need connection and attachment. That's what love is about. But it's critical, especially today, with so much out there. If you thought about it, if you were able to measure the amount, would you leave everything into your door? You're staying at home. You leave your door open. Anything that wants to enter, enters. Of course you wouldn't. Not only because of potential danger, you just don't have room for everything. But when it comes to the mind, we can deceive ourselves. How much are we really absorbing and how much are we don't measure it. It's time to start measuring. If you want to become an independent thinker, the first thing you need to do is eliminate the forces that may be influencing you. How could you know what you're thinking if so many others are telling us what they think, telling you what they think, and trying to influence you? So the first thing is you have to clear the air. You have to slow down that flow. That doesn't mean you shouldn't go out and get opinions, but it should be on your terms, not on their terms, and not on their agenda. You begin with yourself. Let me think about an idea right now. Here's the suggestion. Think about any idea. Write down for yourself some notes, what you think about it. Now you want to explore and research what others think, by all means. But don't begin the other way. First hearing from others and then trying to figure out, what do I really think about this? It's almost impossible once you hear so many different thoughts and so on. And this isn't just an exercise in information collection and information data and facts. This is really about reclaiming yourself, true freedom, to be able to be you and not someone else. You were born an original, don't become a copy. Find your voice, find your song, find your uniqueness, because every one of us, you are unique, you're indispensable, you have something that no one else has. So it would be a shame, a disgrace, if it gets completely overwhelmed in the rush hour of so many ideas and thoughts. You want to be able to find that voice. And when you do, it's almost nothing is more gratifying, because you hear yourself, you hear your voice, it resonates, your song, your music. Oliver Wendell Holmes put it so beautifully, but also so tragically, in his poem, The Voiceless. Alas to those that die with their song still inside them. You have a song that's yours, but it drowns out. It's like the very fine hum, the very fine strings of a beautiful violin. But when there's a lot of noise out there, that turbulence completely covers up that voice. In the words of the prophet, that when Elijah was looking for God, says he saw a great wind. No, and God was not in it. Then he heard, and he saw great lightning, fire, and God was not there. And then he saw great thunder. Wind, fire, and thunder. And that was not. And then came a voice, a subtle, gentle, soft voice. That is the voice we're looking for. To be able to claim that, to own it, to reclaim it, we have to shut down some of the extracurricular disturbances out there. May we all be blessed to be able to have the willpower and the courage to do so, because we are addicted, let's be honest. We're addicted to our devices, to this information. We don't see its effect, but it'll change your entire life, starting with your priorities, what matters, and begin to control. That you initiate how you should think, not others should initiate it, and then you react or either just agree or just don't even challenge it. And I believe if each one of us does that, you can have a completely changed reality that affects every aspect of our lives, how we think, how we speak, how we act, how we love each other, how we care about each other, instead of becoming a herd mentality of groups that just follow blindly, the blind leading the blind. And we can create a better personal life and a better communal and social life and a better world. Thank you so much for listening. And I would love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, and especially your disagreements. That's part of the process. Simon Jacobs near meaningfullife.com is our website. We're here on all the channels, whether you all social media channels, trying to use this technology to help us actually open our minds instead of close our minds. So please share, please like, please subscribe, and please feedback. I thrive on that, and it's always an honor and pleasure. Everyone be well, stay healthy, and see you again next week.